I have one question. Who hates Unai Emery? So let's get into it. Let's not waste any time. Um, Here we go. Let me just put myself into the corner. So, I mean, the first game, as you know, Arsenal versus Manchester City. That's a big game. But, so let's have a look. So that will be televised. That's an unbelievable. Usually it never happens that two of the big six draw each other. So Arsenal will be hosting Manchester City. Bournemouth will host Cardiff City. Fulham, in their first game back in the Premier League, will take on Crystal Palace in an all-London clash. Huddersfield Town will face Chelsea, potentially under new manager. Liverpool start with West Ham. Manchester United have Leicester. Leicester put on a hell of a game in the first game last year against Arsenal in that 4-3. It was a very, very good game. Newcastle United will face Tottenham. That was the first game last year as well, if you remember, when Dele Alli was stamped on by John Joe Shelby and he got sent off and ended up 2-0. Southampton will play Burnley. Watford host Brighton and Hove Albion, and Wolverhampton Wanderers start off the season with Everton. So, and then the next lot, Saturday the 18th of August, Brighton host Manchester United. Burnley, Watford, Cardiff City, Newcastle, Chelsea host Arsenal in that terrible start for Arsenal. Crystal Palace host Liverpool. Everton have Southampton. Wolverhampton Wanderers travel to Leicester. Manchester City host Huddersfield. Alright, bloody hell. So Huddersfield have Chelsea at home, Manchester City away in their first two games. That's bloody awful as well. Spurs host Fulham, another all-London clash. There is talk of that being played at Wembley and the rest of their fixtures being played at New White Hart Lane. I guess we will see. They need to clarify that by Friday. West Ham in their first game at the London Stadium will be against AFC Bournemouth. Saturday the 25th of August, Arsenal host West Ham. Bournemouth will play Everton, Fulham, Burnley, Huddersfield, Cardiff, Liverpool, Brighton. That was the final game. And then a huge game, Manchester United versus Tottenham. Newcastle plays Chelsea. So it's a difficult start for Newcastle as well. Southampton versus Leicester. Watford versus Crystal Palace. And Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Manchester City. Into September we go. 1st of September, Brighton Fulham. Burnley versus Manchester United. Cardiff versus Arsenal. Chelsea versus Bournemouth. Crystal Palace versus Southampton. Everton versus Huddersfield. Leicester versus Liverpool. Manchester United versus Newcastle. Watford versus Tottenham. West Ham United versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. Go to the 15th. So after the international break, we come back to this pile of fixtures. Bournemouth will host Leicester. Cardiff will travel to Chelsea. Everton versus West Ham. Huddersfield versus Crystal Palace. Manchester City versus Fulham. Newcastle will host Arsenal. Southampton will host Brighton and Hove Albion. Tottenham and Liverpool, massive game on the 15th, coming back in. Watford and Manchester United, and then finally Wolverhampton Wanderers will face Burnley. To the 22nd of September, Arsenal Everton. Brighton Spurs. Burnley versus Bournemouth. Cardiff will host Manchester City. Crystal Palace versus Newcastle. Fulham will have Watford. Leicester City versus Huddersfield. Liverpool versus Southampton. Manchester United will host newly promoted Wolverhampton Wanderers, and West Ham will face Chelsea. The 29th of September, Arsenal will be playing Watford, Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Cardiff, Burnley, Chelsea, Liverpool. That's a huge game. Everton, Fulham, Huddersfield, Spurs, Manchester City, Brighton, Newcastle, Leicester, West Ham versus Manchester United. West Ham have quite a difficult run, and Wolverhampton Wanderers will play Southampton. So that is all of the September fixtures. We go to October now. First week in October, we have a delightful set of fixtures. Manchester City versus Liverpool stands out. Liverpool versus Manchester City. Brighton versus West Ham. Burnley versus Huddersfield. Crystal Palace versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. Fulham versus Arsenal. Leicester versus Everton. As I said, Liverpool versus Manchester City. Manchester United versus Newcastle United. That seems weird. Pretty sure I've already read that one out. Southampton versus Chelsea. Tottenham versus Cardiff City. And Watford versus Huddersfield. Watford versus Bournemouth, sorry. Okay, and we go to the 20th of October. Arsenal, Leicester, Bournemouth, Southampton in a South Coast derby. Cardiff will play Fulham in both teams have just been promoted. A huge game. Chelsea versus Manchester United. Everton versus Crystal Palace. Huddersfield versus Liverpool. Manchester City versus Burnley. Newcastle versus Brighton. West Ham will face Tottenham in a London derby, and Wolverhampton Wanderers will host Watford. So the 27th of October. Obviously, all of these are subjected to TV. Brighton versus Wolverhampton Wanderers, Burnley versus Chelsea, Crystal Palace versus Arsenal, Fulham versus AFC Bournemouth, Leicester City versus West Ham United, Liverpool versus Cardiff, Manchester United versus Everton, Southampton versus Newcastle United. Another huge game. Spurs will host Manchester City, and Watford will host Huddersfield. Some of these have no meaning at the moment, but could be massive games come October, November. So the first week of November, 3rd of November, Arsenal, Liverpool, massive game. Bournemouth versus Manchester United. Cardiff, Leicester, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Everton, Brighton, Huddersfield, Fulham, Manchester City, Southampton, Newcastle United against Watford, West Ham versus Burnley, Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Spurs. So we go to Saturday, and the 10th of November. Arsenal versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. Cardiff versus Brighton. Chelsea, Everton. Crystal Palace, Spurs. Huddersfield, West Ham. Leicester, Burnley. Liverpool, Fulham. And then the big one. Manchester City will host Manchester United. Newcastle versus Bournemouth. And Southampton versus Watford. 24th of November, we go to Bournemouth versus Arsenal, Brighton versus Leicester, Burnley versus Newcastle, Everton host Cardiff City, Fulham will play Southampton, Manchester United versus Crystal Palace, Spurs Chelsea in a huge game, Watford versus Liverpool, West Ham versus Manchester City, and of course Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Huddersfield. So Pellegrini will face his old side on the 24th of November. There is a break between the 10th of November and the 24th of November. Then we go into the Christmas period. So Saturday, the 1st of December, it is a North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham. Cardiff City versus Wolverhampton Wanderers, an all-promoted clash there. Fulham will go to Chelsea. Crystal Palace will play Burnley. Huddersfield will play Brighton. Leicester, Watford. Liverpool, Everton in another huge derby, the Merseyside derby. Manchester City versus Bournemouth. Newcastle United versus West Ham. Southampton versus Manchester United. Tuesday, the 4th of December. This is the first midweek games we have. So who will be playing who? Bournemouth will be playing Huddersfield, Brighton, Crystal Palace. That's a clash there, a derby. Burnley versus Liverpool, Fulham versus Leicester City, Watford versus Manchester City, West Ham United versus Cardiff City, Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Chelsea, and then in a massive one, Manchester United versus Arsenal. Now, I don't know why that has changed already, but Wednesday the 5th, Everton versus Newcastle, and of course Spurs versus Southampton. We go to the 8th of December. Arsenal versus Huddersfield, Bournemouth, Liverpool, Burnley, Brighton, Cardiff, Southampton. Massive game. Chelsea versus Manchester City, Everton, Watford, Leicester, Spurs. Manchester United will host Fulham. Newcastle United versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. West Ham versus Crystal Palace. On the 15th of September, Brighton versus Chelsea, Crystal Palace versus Leicester City, Fulham versus West Ham, Huddersfield versus Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester United, wow, Manchester City versus Everton, that'll probably be a Super Sunday, Southampton versus Arsenal, Tottenham versus Burnley, Watford, Cardiff, and Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Bournemouth. To the 22nd of September, this will be the Saturday before Christmas. Arsenal, Burnley, Bournemouth, Brighton, Cardiff, Manchester United, Chelsea, Leicester, Everton, Tottenham, Huddersfield Town versus Southampton, Man City versus Crystal Palace, Newcastle versus Fulham, West Ham versus Watford, and Wolves versus Liverpool. 26th, Boxing Day. Will we be provided with any treats? Not by the look of it. Brighton versus Arsenal, Burnley versus Everton, Crystal Palace will host Cardiff, Fulham will play Wolves in an all-promoted clash, Leicester versus Man City, Liverpool, Newcastle, Manchester United versus Huddersfield Town, Southampton versus West Ham, Spurs versus AFC Bournemouth, and Watford versus Chelsea. To the 29th of, so this will be the last fixture of the year. Brighton, Everton, Burnley versus West Ham United, Crystal Palace, Chelsea, Fulham versus Huddersfield, Leicester host Cardiff, Liverpool, Arsenal in a huge game, Manchester United versus Bournemouth, Southampton versus Manchester City, Spurs versus Wolves, Watford against Newcastle, and that is the end. So then we go into 2019. We have games on New Year's Day. Arsenal versus Fulham, Bournemouth versus Watford, Cardiff versus Spurs, Chelsea, Southampton, Everton versus Leicester, Huddersfield versus Burnley. In a huge game, we have Manchester City versus Liverpool. That's going to be taken on New Year's Day. Wow. Newcastle versus Manchester United again. West Ham versus Brighton, Wolves versus Crystal Palace. Saturday the 12th of January. There is a jump here because of the FA Cup. Brighton will be playing Liverpool, Burnley versus Fulham, Cardiff versus Huddersfield, Chelsea versus Newcastle, Palace, Watford, Everton, Bournemouth, Leicester, Southampton, Manchester City will play Wolves, Spurs will host Manchester United, and West Ham versus Arsenal. The 19th of May, Arsenal will be playing Chelsea, Bournemouth, West Ham, Fulham, Spurs, Huddersfield, Man City, Liverpool, Crystal Palace, Man United, Brighton, Newcastle, Cardiff, Southampton versus Everton, Watford, Burnley, and finally Wolves versus Leicester City. So that's a repeat of the second week of the season, I think. Tuesday the 29th of January and Wednesday the 30th, we have Arsenal versus Cardiff. We have Bournemouth versus Chelsea, Fulham versus Brighton, Huddersfield versus Everton, Wolves versus West Ham, Manchester United will play Burnley, Newcastle City, Southampton Crystal Palace, Liverpool versus Leicester City, and Tottenham versus Watford. Into February we go. Some of these will be distorted due to the FA Cup. Brighton, Watford, Burnley, Southampton, Cardiff, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Huddersfield, Crystal Palace versus Fulham, Everton, Wolves, Leicester, Manchester United, Manchester City versus Arsenal, big game, Tottenham versus Newcastle, and West Ham United will play Liverpool. Saturday the 9th of February, Brighton versus Burnley, Crystal Palace versus West Ham, Fulham versus Manchester United, Huddersfield, Arsenal, Liverpool, Bournemouth, Manchester City versus Chelsea, Southampton, Cardiff, Spurs versus Leicester, Watford versus Everton, and Wolves against Newcastle. Saturday the 23rd of February, Arsenal versus Southampton, Bournemouth versus Wolves, Burnley versus Tottenham Hotspur, Cardiff versus Watford, Chelsea versus Brighton, Everton, Man City, Leicester versus Crystal Palace, Manchester United versus Liverpool in a huge clash. Newcastle will play Huddersfield, and West Ham will play Fulham. To 26th and 27th of May is another midweek clash. Arsenal versus Bournemouth, Cardiff, Everton, Huddersfield, Wolves, Leicester versus Brighton, Palace, Man United, Chelsea, Tottenham. That's going to be taking place in midweek. Newcastle versus Burnley, Southampton versus Fulham, Liverpool, Watford, Manchester City versus West Ham. And Pellegrini will be returning to the Etihad. Into March. So there will be internationals here. Bournemouth versus Fulham. I don't know why I said that. Bournemouth versus Man City. Brighton, Huddersfield, Burnley, Palace, Everton, Liverpool in a huge Merseyside derby, which means there probably is another one. Tottenham and Arsenal will also be playing each other. Fulham, Chelsea in another little derby there. Man United, Southampton, Watford, Leicester, West Ham versus Newcastle, Wolves against Cardiff City. On to the 9th of March, Arsenal will be hosting Manchester United, Cardiff City versus West Ham, Chelsea versus Wolves, Crystal Palace versus Brighton in a clash there, Huddersfield versus Bournemouth, Leicester, Fulham, Liverpool, Burnley, Man City versus Watford, Newcastle United will host Everton, and Southampton will be hosting Spurs. Saturday the 16th of March even, I don't know why I said that. Bournemouth versus Newcastle, Brighton, Cardiff, Burnley, Leicester, Everton, Chelsea, Fulham versus Liverpool, Manchester United versus Manchester City. So the Manchester derby will be taking place on the 16th of March. I don't know why I keep saying that. Tottenham versus Crystal Palace, Watford versus Southampton, West Ham versus Huddersfield, and of course Wolves versus Arsenal. So then we have the international break, and we come back to play on the 30th of March. Arsenal, Newcastle, Brighton, Southampton, Burnley, Wolves, Cardiff versus Chelsea, Crystal Palace versus Huddersfield, Fulham, Man City, Leicester, Bournemouth, Liverpool, Spurs, Manchester United versus Watford, West Ham versus Everton. So into April we go. So the first week of April, Bournemouth play Burnley, Chelsea, West Ham, Everton host Arsenal, Leicester will travel to Huddersfield, Manchester City versus Cardiff, Newcastle, Palace, Southampton, Liverpool, Tottenham, Brighton, Watford will host Fulham. Wolves versus Manchester United, 13th of May, Brighton versus Bournemouth, Burnley versus Cardiff, Crystal Palace versus Manchester City, Fulham versus Everton, Leicester, Newcastle, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester United, West Ham, Southampton, Wolves, Tottenham versus Huddersfield Town, and Watford versus Arsenal. 20th of April, Watford will play Huddersfield. Arsenal versus Crystal Palace. Bournemouth, Fulham. Cardiff, Liverpool. Chelsea, Burnley. Everton versus Manchester United. Manchester City will play Tottenham that day. West Ham versus Leicester. Fulham versus Brighton. 27th of May we have Brighton, Newcastle, Burnley, City, Crystal Palace versus Everton, Fulham, Cardiff, Leicester, Arsenal, Liverpool, Huddersfield, Manchester United versus Chelsea, Southampton versus Bournemouth, Tottenham versus West Ham, and Watford versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. And into the final month of the season, we have just two list of fixtures there. Arsenal, Brighton, Bournemouth versus Tottenham, Cardiff, Crystal Palace, Chelsea, Watford, Everton, Burnley, Huddersfield Town versus Manchester United, Man City versus Leicester, Newcastle versus Liverpool, West Ham versus Southampton, Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Fulham. And on the final day, Brighton host Manchester City. That could be a tough game for them. Burnley versus Arsenal, Crystal Palace versus Bournemouth. That could potentially have something right on it. Fulham, Newcastle, that the same. Leicester City versus Chelsea, Liverpool, Wolves, Manchester United versus Cardiff. That's a horrible tie for Wolves. For Cardiff, Southampton versus Huddersfield, Tottenham versus Everton, and Watford versus West Ham. So that's it. That is the fixtures out. Tell me your thoughts down below on who you think has the toughest start. So we saw that Arsenal had a tough start, as I think Newcastle. So a few have a really tough start to the season, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Obviously Cardiff have a terrible end with Manchester United away. So that are all the fixtures for next season in the Premier League. Tell me your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I am Mike, and I will see you soon.